Okay, it looks like we are live. Well, everyone, here it is, episode 60 of the Lost and Found Bin. And so I don't really know where to start with this one, Chick, because it's almost as if we go 2 weeks, it's almost like we went a full year without talking to everyone. And there's so many people in the chat and so many familiar faces. And thank you everybody for being here. And we do really appreciate it. But Chick, I don't know where do we start with this one?
Um, Indeed, I was just looking at the different articles and things you had posted earlier, and even over the past week or so, because we didn't have a show last week. It just, like I was saying to you, on Twitter, there's parts of the changes now that are kind of going into almost things that Edgar Allan Poe had talked about, and other strange like media references or art references that there's things like coming into reality again, kind of like when we talked about the water parks on the moon situation quite a while ago. Now we're talking about cities in the sea, and we're talking about all strange phenomena going on with the moon, and we're talking about different kinds of things that are coming to our attention that are, to me anyway, on the scale of when the World War II changes were really kicking up.
Yeah, and that's a great point to make in terms of reality itself starting to bend to the perceptions of those that are most keenly in tune to it. And that's kind of the point of view, at least you and I talk about in terms of the way in which we saw things as they were happening in real time with World War II. And that's a great actually point to make. And it's before the show, we were talking for just a minute or two how strange all of it is. And one of the bigger articles that maybe a lot of people missed, but certainly I did, and I brought this up to Chick and she had a great point, was I sent it out and it's in the description here. Is it's from NBC News, and it says why alien moons may be a great place to find extraterrestrial life. Now, given the atmosphere of this whole confirmation process that it's over, it's official. The Navy is drawing up paperwork, or they've drawn it up, and other aspects of the military is starting to writing rules of engagement. We aren't alone; they are here, and you know it's all sort of gone by everyone. And the first thing Chick brought up that was so significant to me, if I could steal your thunder for a second, was why aren't people talking about this more? And this is an NBC News article, mainstream as it gets. I mean, in terms of the only thing more mainstream that I can think of is the New York Times. And this would have been laughed out of the newsroom this time, what, 2, 3 months ago, Chick? So what's up with that?
I don't know. I don't know why there's this kind of um, openness to publish just all these what would have been considered very unusual articles not even so long ago. And it made me think initially of I don't know if many of you remember, but there was a time when they were reporting that we had found like 6 super Earths, and that they were habitable, and that people were going to move there, and then it just disappeared completely from the media.
Mhm.
I couldn't even find articles about that going back, so that made me think that perhaps it was a shift. And then
Mhm.
with the things that are happening right now, I wouldn't be surprised if um, and I don't know, how this sounds, but when it's kind of surrounding a shift, it seems to be able to get that much more ludicrous than usual. As in the articles, the things you'll see, or the TV shows, or the kind of you might even see things around a shift that point to a shift, like they show you the thing that's different this time. Like for me, maps will always come up. For other people, someone said yesterday that the Spanish pronunciation of angel has changed to angel now, and that
Mm.
it was weirding them out. Like there's just these strange things going on, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's a big shift, and I wouldn't be surprised if there's big things that are going to just suddenly, appear Mandela effect style, and people say, "Oh, that was always there. We knew about that 20 years ago," and that might even happen with this dome.
Well, and one of the and that's a great point. And one of the stranger things that I'm finding is you have this concept of diminishing returns, and then on the other end, you have this concept in finance, and it's called the power of compounding interest. And someone said to me once that there's nothing more powerful than the power of compounding interest, and that's the concept of if you leave a dollar alone and you just let it save in it, and if you put it in the right vehicle that will allow it to compound an interest, it becomes exponential in terms of the power that it generates. And that's almost like what I feel like if we did indeed have a shift. And certainly from um, my contact has been sending me different kind of physics and articles related to shifts and the Mandela effect. So these two are still very much tied together, and the most recent one was, reality is information. Now imagine, you and I have gone over this concept, over and over again, the idea that reality itself could be sort of like that code descending like in the Matrix, and all it's a matter of is changing the code somewhat, and so you have this cascading series of changes that happen, and not all all human beings, if they were seen in terms of being like conscious nodes, they weren't all getting the updates, as it were. But I like the idea now of, you know uh, right in the middle of a shift, there's this conscious movement towards trying to change as much of reality as possible in this really small time frame. And then as you do that, you sort of have this compounding interest effect like you talked about. It first started with, just a dollar, and that would represent what you just said. They found, earths there, or they found planets that are like Earth. They're in that Goldilocks zone that they talk about. That's sort of the first bit of interest, of compounding interest, that was found. And now we're at the point where the kind of money, quote, money that's being made in terms of whatever this is being compounded at a rate that it finally, they have this term where you're far away from capital dislocation, which means that you're making so much money, it would be hard for you to outspend yourself because you're making so much money. And that must be a wonderful and an awful place to be in, because that's where we're at right now. We're almost beyond the confines of capital dislocation in terms of the amount of code that's changing in reality as we speak right now. And it just seems as if these kinds of article now are completely ho-hum. So that accounts for like this ongoing thing. And I think the thing for you and I, we were there right at the beginning, I feel. And when we were just talking about manned animals, and we were still talking about Ed McMahon, and now we're talking about, these terrestrial kind of shifts and these terrestrial changes, and perhaps a Mandela effect happened in a shift. We talked about the concept of the Mandela effect being used as a mode of transportation. Perhaps, quote unquote, aliens or shifters or whatever it may be capitalizing on that. Who knows?
Indeed. And I think that just as you mentioned the codes updating, when you were talking, I believe it was maybe 2 days ago that someone in the chat said their lower back was hurting, and then you said that your back was hurting when you woke up. I was listening to that show, and my back was hurting,
Mm.
and not just that, but the amount, like people saying that they're so tired recently. I've definitely been feeling that all the time. There's someone in the chat here today that said they're having ringing in the left ear. I've been having a little bit of ringing in the left ear. But anyway, my point is that I'm surprised at the amount of people whose symptoms are in synchronicity this time. And, there have been times where people have had syncs before on how and when they felt surrounding a shift. But this has been kind of an elongated experience. It's been like 2 weeks or so.
That's a good point. And for me, my left ear, it doesn't hurt. What it sounds like is almost like you hear a plane engine firing off in a or any kind of engine, almost like in a hangar. And I feel as if there's like that sound is in my left ear. And yes, my lower back and sort of my middle to upper back has been killing me for about I'd go on 3 days maybe. So I would say definitely we either just shifted, we're about to shift, or something like that. But definitely, it's something's going on with that. I would agree. Now, my contact, I tweeted that out saying that this shrinking moon thing, that was out way back last month, and that was out before. That was right about the time they found the moon in the atmosphere, right? That was all right. It was within about a week or so.
Yeah, I believe it was very close to the same time.
So he is looking into that because he doesn't know what's up with that. And that's a little disturbing to me because he's able to predict so many things way ahead. I mean, he predicted this whole UFO thing. He was right. He predicted that. And at one point in one article, and I wish I would have saved it about the moon, there being, the moon, it's primarily made of this metallic kind of alloy thing or something, and they brought up the fact that it was a metal machine, and I think it was like a Freudian slip on paper or something, but indeed, it's weirdness. It's all around us.
I wouldn't be surprised if they start connecting the moon with shifts, because there's been so much talk since 2012 actually about kind of moon, not like mind control in the MK Ultra sense, but that the moon has something to do with being caught in a cycle, like a deja vu kind of thing. And in that kind of way, it's like an amnesia control for a lot of people.
Mm.
And it ties into the doorway effect as well on another scale. So I wouldn't be surprised with the shifting and you know turning around and around as things are, that it may very well come out that we've done this before. It may very well come out that we'll do this again. I'm not sure how much of a loop this is, but I'm also betting that the things that are going to be discovered in the very near future will probably be things that were, well known about in the past and were covered up probably.
No, no doubt, no doubt. And also too, like I was talking with someone recently about kind of these wing makers and this process of these people discovering these kind of ancient artifacts, and these wing makers are. I'll get into that in another episode as I learn about it much more. But essentially, it's about like what we're all talking about: finding ancient things and being able to move through reality in a non-conventional way, and time, let's say reality and time. It's almost like like going through the astral plane, or it's almost like something like the gateway process, but not exactly. It's a little different, but kind of the same concept, and I can get into that later, and I can show you the paperwork on that afterwards. But there's so many ideas popping up right now, and there's so many different concepts now that you would have been just laughed out of the room of serious scientific people. And I think part of it is, and tell me if I'm wrong, but you really can't prove it. Look, like I've said before, if this is on the table now and this is real, that UFOs, UAPs, whatever you want to call them, that they're a real thing, right? Then we probably have better than a 50% chance that these things are being piloted, or at least there's some kind of drones to some kind of thinking, intelligent being or beings or whatever. Um, we now have we only have what would have been considered the fringe to kind of give us any kind of guidelines, right? Am I wrong? We can only look to the most extreme people who would talk about lizard people or something like, or shapeshifters and things like that, because there's no step beyond this now. I'm unless they have something lined up, which I don't know about. I see a real vacuum coming in here unless the government has an idea lined up to go, okay, we've introduced UFOs. Now we're going to introduce something else.
Something crazier, something way further out than, there are people that are changing their entire concept of what reality is because of how fluid things are right now. And like I was saying with the shifts and the kind of concept of things getting kind of even crazier in the overlap zone, which is what I call, kind of the place where two dimensions are still kind of overlapping, like what you would go through in a shift. I
Mhm.
think that things truly can get lost in time, as in they go into that overlap zone and disappear from a reality that you can reach. and then
Mhm.
reappear again at a time that's supposed to happen. And I think that's what's happening now. I think that there are things that, like I said, were probably well known about in the past that perhaps even disappeared from reality and now are coming back into our visible light spectrum reality that we're able to interact with.
Oh, no
And people
doubt.
are freaking, not everyone, but some people are getting freaked out by how quickly things are changing. And it's just important to remember we have to be adaptable. And I'm trying to say to myself not to be trained by Hollywood and all the movies that they've made about these kind of things, like paranormal or space or anything like that. I want to keep my mind completely open to try and learn what's going on here. Because I think that while, we've discussed how important fiction is, I don't want to take any pre-programming, or suggestions on this. I want to see for myself what is going on and how far is it going to stretch, reality-wise, over the next couple of months or so.
Yeah, and that I'm glad you brought that up because when I talk about fiction too, a lot of that is like me, it's an alarm bell. I'm telling people, look, part of this feedback loop that we get from film is, again, they're capturing. It's like real estate. They're capturing that bit of real estate that you have. Your mind is real estate and they're capturing it. They literally say capturing your imagination. And the idea of fiction is being able to create your own. And I think that that's obviously, it's obvious, not, I don't think, I know it's somehow tied into being able to create the reality around you and not in some sort of superficial new agey kind of it's a fad kind of way. I mean in like I talk about a tank roaring towards you that's loaded and ready to go kind of way, like in a very serious life and death kind of way. And you're right, I think by creating your own fictive idea of what reality is, and in a lot of ways, if we can do that, I keep hearing that number 7%. If 7% can take control like that, then there's a real possibility of being able to maybe perhaps stabilizing this or something, or whatever it may be. But somehow, in some way, that we're getting more pieces of the puzzle all the time. The Mandela effect is definitely deeply intertwined with all of these things, and it's just part of the strands of DNA that actually creates all of this, because again, none of this is in a vacuum. And you've got to admit, Chick, it is awfully strange. We start noticing the Mandela effect in mass around 2015, 2016, and I know people noticed it early on. That's probably people who are really extra sensitive in terms of their abilities to manifest things, or their quote unquote psychic or supernatural abilities. But for the rest of us, those of us that are at just average, we started around 2015. I know for you and I, we talked at least one of your rounds was late 2016 as well as mine. And then suddenly now we're right, what, 2.5, 3 years into this. And out of the 70 years people were trying to get disclosure to happen, it finally happens within May. So within the last 5 or 6 weeks. And now within that, we suddenly find out the moon is in Earth's atmosphere. World War II is nothing like what we thought it was. I mean, just the list goes on. The list is so long now. I'm actually going to have to start writing it down, Chick. It's so out of control.
That's the thing. Like, that's one of the things that I've, adjusted to, but it took me a minute, was I would write a list of all the new things, in 2016, and I would draw like pictures of the shapes of countries the way I remembered them and things like that. And then the changes became so numerous that the lists of things that I was making was more than my memory of the original. And I feel like that's almost where we are now, is like there's so many changes and so many things that we've discussed and seen that are different than where we started from, that it's getting difficult to even remember a lot about where we started from.
Yeah, and the timing, I no longer think. I used to think, wow, this timing is so suspect. I wonder if, and I don't wonder if. I think this is all part of it. And like I said, not only is the Mandela effect probably not the main show, the Mandela effect could almost be something of like the first layer of the onion, so to speak, and then you're in and you now understand your reality wasn't what it was. And then in that way, you can understand and derive deeper meaning to your reality, deeper meaning to the interaction you have with other human beings and what it means to be a human being. And then finally, we get more guidance. I said, the teacher shows up when the student's ready. Suddenly we start getting all these great documents from Buster. And obviously the cornerstone of this is Gateway, which was founded originally by the Geos. And then finally Buster finds this just treasure trove of DIA documents, CIA documents. We have the round robin document. And now Buster has this other it's like it's an amazing document too that we're trying to figure out a way to release that. I don't know if we sent that to you yet or not, but we got to get that over to you because it's huge and it's going to easily build on Gateway. But the point is, the bigger point is we've got the timing, and then you almost have this inadvertent schooling of everybody that's part of this channel or around ME. And it all seems to be centered around the same time. And it all started around this 2016 time period. And then as it ramps up, it gets to the point now. There were days where everything was changing. Did you like 2 weeks ago where it was every single day?
Yeah, I remember that. That was a little bit, yeah, excuse me. It's when you have those like streams of days where it's changing maybe, once a day or more than once a day.
Mhm.
It starts to get very, very disconcerting, especially like when it's things in your neighborhood or things in front of you, or even, something as small as like the cat's fur pattern is different. And you like know it's different, and you're like, that's
Yeah.
that's pretty strange. I can't account for that. And while people might think it's insignificant, any change in reality is the same size as any other change in reality. The first step is the most
Right.
impossible
Right.
in that whole process. Is like any change in reality is as big as an entire building changing, or something even bigger than that.
Yeah, because it doesn't matter at that point, because if you're talking about reality being information, any bit of information that's out of place is as important as all of it being out of place at that point. Because at that point, you're only talking about scale. And that's why it's so important. And somehow, I'm still thinking somehow that the Mandela effect is an active mechanism that has something to do with the way in which these craft travel. I think there's a mechanism that's beyond just simple, gravity and the way in which that they're gravitics or whatever that they describe it. I think there are other things in terms of the way in which mm, I, I wouldn't necessarily say a like astral, but I would say it was closer to like what they were talking about in the round robin document from the FBI. You've got these almost ethereal layers to it. And as you breach these ethereal layers, sort of these strings of reality are plucked in this really thin band that we can see in reality. And that's what I think is happening. And that's why we're seeing UFOs. And I'm speculating, but I think that eventually this building up here is getting us ready, obviously, for something. At a minimum, it's going to be a crystal dome.
Indeed, and I've been wondering about that as to whether it'll show up in the Atlantic or maybe in the Indian Ocean. Those are
Mm.
my top two picks for where I think it'll be found.
Interesting. Interesting. I don't know. It could be. Certainly it could be. I think that let me see, I'm checking out the chat and seeing what everybody's saying. Yeah, a lot of people, and I can understand why a lot of people are upset or could have a lot of fear. Someone saying it's a wake up call. Yeah, get your house in order. Yeah, certainly it could be something like that. I know that again, we do have these great. Oh, thank you, Kelly. Oh, and if anybody's been has been giving super chats, Kelly, thank you for the super chat. If anybody's been giving them and I didn't call you out, I apologize. I haven't been looking at the chat because Chick and I were talking. I'll go back up in the chat and see. Um, but thank you for that. I really appreciate that. Yeah. So, what are you thinking? What are you thinking's next?
Oh my gosh. What could possibly come next after all this? Well, there are a lot more pyramids here than there were originally, and some of those are underwater. And I wouldn't be
Hmm.
surprised if there are structures, not just pyramids, but structures off of the coast of Japan. And like I also mentioned, the Indian Ocean I expect to be very busy. And what they call the North Atlantic Ocean used to be just the Atlantic Ocean, but the placement of South America has like pinched that ocean almost in half. So we'll see, but I don't think it's going to be as crazy at Antarctica. And I know a lot of people have been saying that they think Antarctica is where everything is going to go wild, but I don't think that that's going to be this time. I'm not saying that I don't think it will be in the future, but I honestly think the dome is not going to be in the South Pole.
And there's just this real fascination. Do you think it's because it's so hard to get to Antarctica why people are so obsessed with it? I don't know. I mean, I don't mean I didn't mean to like belittle that. Do you think, especially if that's somebody's like if that's their thing? I certainly didn't mean to come out that way. But do you think that? Hey, thanks, I appreciate that, Rich. Thanks for the super chat. But do you think it's because it's so remote, or what or it's mysterious, or I don't know.
Well, the rules are different in different places, as in like in the different versions that I've seen. In some places, it's illegal to go to Antarctica, and you have to have written permission from special scientific communities and all kinds of crazy things. Then in this current reality here, they said you can go, but it's going to cost you $10,000, and the money is what makes it prohibitive. And then in other places, you have to be a scientist with full qualifications to go at all to Antarctica, even to visit. So, apart from the royal family, because I know that they have permission to go whenever they want, there's been like photos of their expeditions, etc. They seem to have immunity from the Antarctic treaties. But yeah, there's as soon as people look into the Antarctic treaties, they're like, this is the one thing that every country on Earth agrees upon. And why is
Mhm.
that? Because usually countries will disagree with each other on, anything. But in this, they all signed up for this treaty. And why
Yeah.
would they if it's nothing but ice down there?
Thank you, BB, and thank you, She Union. And the thing about that down there, it is interesting that the laws are so different down there. And that does, I guess, that does make sense the way that you described it. Then you're right, and there's just the mystique about it. And I remember there was some kind of weird footage about it. Like there was some kind of, it wasn't a moon eclipse or something, but it got dark all of a sudden, and people found out that the footage or something was like 8 minutes out of it, do you remember that? That was like 10 years ago or something. Maybe I'm thinking about another timeline, but,
I've seen a lot
anyway.
of weird footage from different timelines, like around different shifts. Like one of
Mhm,
them, there appeared to be this like big whirlpool,
mhm,
but not underwater. It was a strange because it looked fluid, but it wasn't like a tornado. Almost like water going down a sink, and that was the North Pole, and that was some strange leaked footage. And then there was strange footage from, I believe it was from RT, where they said that they had discovered some kind of a structure in Antarctica, and they seem to have put CGI of like an underground like spaceship just for a second. And I remember like posting about that and saying, "Are they trolling? Like, why would they put a CGI? Clearly something that isn't for discovering or for digging up, ruins. Why would they have that there?" Unless they're like poking fun at the people that believe that there's ancient structures in Antarctica. I don't
well,
know.
and
There's
that's
been a couple of things going on.
and I think that's where we finally see the dividing line between a post, confirmation slash disclosure world and before, because now that's not ridiculous. You have NBC. You have all the I mean, everybody, New York Times, the Washington Post, my favorite headline was "UFOs are real, get used to it." And that sad WPBS article saying we may have to believe in UFOs, but we won't have to believe in aliens. So it's just said, "Oh, thank you, Darren. I appreciate that." This is my absolute favorite place for free thought and free speech. Thank you. That's wonderful. Um, but the thing about it is someone mentioned in the chat, and this is an important point that I want to make. And I'm sorry that I missed who said this in the chat because thank you for saying that. And you can bring it up again. But talking about UFOs, and I know that they've spoken about this before, that it sort of bends time
Hmm.
because of the UFO. What if, and obviously this is speculation, everyone, because of the increased activity that was going to happen with with UFOs and whatever mechanisms, and I'm talking about real machinery here. I'm not talking about gateway kind of etheric once you're clicked out. I'm talking about what if there's machinery that can bend space and time. And one of the ramifications, if you use this machinery in this plane of existence, is that we have what we call a Mandela effect. And what if these shifts are potential landings of massive ships or something like that? Because I know the two are tied. The two have to do with space and time, right? The two have to do with what would be considered just completely absurd and outrageous. And I just hope that people will be able to open their minds now to other alternative ideas now that UFOs are a reality. They're a fact. It's done. It's over with. They're real. It's a matter of either the government giving up the data they have on it, or they start collecting the data openly with all of us and they start taking us seriously. And I know MUFON has a lot, probably a very impressive database of instances, and perhaps they already do work with the government. I don't know the whole. I'm not really familiar with that world, but I know that they talked about it. In order for the gravity to work in the vehicles, it bends space and time, and oftentimes that's why the vehicles look as if they just disappear, and that oftentimes has to do with that frequency thing because everything's moving. But I wonder if that's it. That's part of what's happening with the Mandela effect is when one of these things come around, they inadvertently create some kind of weird time portal vertex thing, and then suddenly, boom, you have a real change.
Well, it certainly does make me think, like what you were saying earlier there, about how perhaps bending time and space like that could be causing Mandela effects. And what we do have to look at is, remember a couple episodes ago when we said the Bermuda Triangle used to be rare? It's not
Mhm.
rare anymore. There's an enormous amount of Bermuda Triangles, with different names. And we read out the list, I think it was 2 episodes ago. But, anyways, there's a lot of them, and there's more and more and more all the time. With the increased activity that we're seeing, it is possible, perhaps, with using shifting as a mode of transport, that if you're using equipment to kind of break through that barrier, maybe that's why there's all these vile vortices, vile vortexes, because they're appearing all the time, and the place is looking like Swiss cheese now, and there has to be a reason for that.
That's a good point. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. And we can't assume, we can't assume that this ramp up isn't part of something that's going to permanently keep those, or part of a process to permanently keep those vortices completely open rather than having to wait, and rather than have us in a state of shifting and it be not the norm, us not shifting and kind of inverting that whole idea to where we're in a constant state of flux. That would be troubling to me. And another thing real quick, we got 34 thumbs up. If you guys could get the thumbs up, it's free. It helps us so much. We have 113, 115 people watching. It would help us out so much because obviously the channel is not being promoted, and it just helps us so much. And if you could share this, if you could, if you're on other platforms like Facebook, I couldn't get on Facebook. That was funny. If you could get on other platforms and share this, that would be very helpful to the channel and get the word out. Yeah, unidentified is really amazing. It's an amazing show. It's really crazy. But 47 thumbs up, wonderful. If we could get that higher, that would that would be very. Yeah, Facebook denied me. Did you see that,
I
chick?
did. I thought it was really funny. Um,
Ras- Rasputin. So they wanted my face, right? Because I wanted to do a public page. Because I had to get on and make a private page, and I gave a fake name because I don't want them knowing my stuff, man. And so I was, and they let me go through, and I wanted to do a public page where we could drop like links and people could talk to us in a format that's not Twitter because some people just aren't comfortable with Twitter and a lot of people seem to be on Facebook. So I thought I'd put a public page out there where we could have another way to interact with people. And they wanted my picture and they wouldn't let the button go next. It was grayed out. And I don't want them having my picture. So I put up an old picture of Rasputin and I put it in there and they shut it down. I keep checking my email and they have the real email, and I'm waiting for them to reply. They haven't replied yet. So, like Facebook, holy cow, you want to talk about next level? I thought, I hear Twitter's bad. I haven't had a real hard time yet with Twitter, and I'm certainly having a hard time with YouTube. But that is some next level stuff where they want your face. That's crazy.
I think it's next level that they know you didn't give them your face. It says to me that there's some facial recognition technology already in play. And I did notice the other day on a gaming computer that
Mhm.
someone I know has, there doesn't seem to be any camera on it, but it has an option where it can follow your eye line instead of using the mouse for like clicking things. So it's like, okay, there's definitely some kind of technology going on here that is a little bit more than the old days, let's just say.
Wow. Wow. Yeah, it's all getting back to. I think they're so far ahead. They're already to that point. We were all blown away. If any, there obviously we have a lot of new people to the channel. All of us were blown away like 3 months ago when we read through the gateway process and then we found out about frequency and it was all about clicking in and out of time space and we were just so blown away. We just couldn't believe it. And then you start thinking about applying technologies outside of time space. And then you're like, well, of course, they don't need really cameras. That's a lot of that is really obsolete and used probably just for the general population. And I talk about us like we're already in a prison.
Oh boy, that's like, uh, I mean, I think we've had this discussion before, but people buy the technology willingly that is causing such an upheaval in what used to be privacy. And I used to say, oh, you gotta wake people to things and you gotta shake them out of it. But I mean, on the other hand, if people really want what's going on now and they want things to continue this way and they're willing to willingly pay for it, how can you stop them? Which is really hopeless spot to be, but I'm just like, how can you? People want this. We're outnumbered on this issue.
Well, like I said, I've said it before and I'll say it again. And now that we're even weeks into this, it's still relevant that we've moved beyond even the UFO thing, that it's real. We're getting to the point where NBC again with this article, they're just floating ideas now about aliens being on different moons or different satellites or different this or that. And it's, before I just, you know, it's just hard to imagine 6 weeks ago, you still would have been laughed at. And another thing, not only aren't people paying attention, another important thing to think about, very few, particularly UFO researchers, but also people who are just in alternative research altogether. I've only seen now 2 people maybe take somewhat of a victory lap that they were right, and they were ridiculed for decades, and they took a bit of a victory lap for themselves. And there's so little I know about human behavior, I'm realizing, because I thought I just had my ducks in a row with people, and I know nothing about our species and their behavior in mass because I'm just so surprised that this is so not on the minds of every person and on the lips of every person. And it's just not, chick. It's not. It's weird.
I remember saying to some people that I know like, hey, did you guys see Fox News and these other mainstream outlets talking about this UAP situation? And the response I got back was more along the lines of, oh, maybe what's going on is that it's, you know, foreign equipment or Russian equipment or something, and that we're building, you know, spaceships to go against their spaceships. And I'm like, well, that's, you know, one thought on it, but I think that it's eventually going to get too weird to even try to put it under that umbrella, under like a Department of Defense umbrella. Because sure, I mean, probably a lot of the craft that I've seen anyway from like the Northrop Grumman ads, they look very much along that design because it is a design that like breaks through the wind. But I don't think that it's easy to misconstrue what's being plainly said into something that feels, you know, safer.
Sure. And this is a bit inside baseball, but I did some commentary on the Richard Dolan video, and his video was talking about the Admiral Wilson papers, and they said in the papers they've been authenticated. The papers are real, and inside the papers they talk about a private contractor, which now we know to be Bigelow's organization. That it was some time ago. I don't remember. You can go back. I have everything with the video, but they go over, you know, the technology itself, and they're quite open that it's alien hardware, and that they were either in the process at the time or they had completed. I don't remember. It was a while back, but they have the hardware and they're quite open about it. Now, I understand why you know, NBC didn't run with that, because that would, I don't know. I know, actually, no, I don't understand why NBC wouldn't run with that. Now that these items have been authenticated, why wouldn't they run with something like that? Because if anything, that would, I would think, just in my mind personally, and I guess this is my opinion, it would soothe me to know that the military at least has one of these crafts, and and they're working on it. So, not even our, as in like America or anything like that. I mean, like human beings at least are working on this thing, man, and they're trying to figure this out versus being completely flat-footed, you know, and completely, we're just so out of our league. So I would find it more soothing. At least I found it a bit, you know, and I know that it was a couple years old. So at this point, perhaps they've completely mastered this thing and they've got something they haven't rolled out yet, or I don't know. Could be also why these things are also showing up, is they know we're getting close to, you know, to breaking this thing down. Obviously, I'm speculating, but still.
It's kind of like a seesaw effect in that they're being very open in the mainstream media with talking about this kind of stuff in a way that they never were before. But it's like they don't run it too much because there's so little interest in this story, which is a very strange
Good
spot to
point.
be.
Good point. And also, too, that also gives them the freedom to then know, in a weird way, for filler, why not run an article that says why alien moons may be a great place to find extraterrestrial life, which and then NASA, they put out shrinking moon may be generating moonquakes. So why not? Why not put it all out? You know, you're right. Actually, that's a great point you make. So yeah, sure. Why not? No one's paying attention. No one cares. I don't know. It's so weird.
I'm just shaking my head at it because that's been a thing since day one of this. Is the question is like, why do people not care? And
Mhm.
everything's becoming more and more and more ludicrous and insane, and people are, you know, harder and harder not caring to the absolute just reckless boundaries of denial. It's, I don't know where that's going to end up.
Well, for people of faith, I was having a conversation with another anonymous person, and he was talking about the idea of NPCs, right? And that's a common term that gets thrown around in particularly in ME circles. You know, people don't get the download, or certain people are susceptible to, you know, whatever ME shift may happen to them. And I said, well, you know, you could look at it like, it bothered this this anonymous person I was talking to, which isn't my contact. This is just another person. It bothered him, and, because it is kind of dehumanizing to those people. I said, "Yes, that's one way you could look at it, but obviously, if you still treat them with dignity like you would any human being, whether they had an internal world or not, then what that really matters is whether or not you're acting like a decent person." I said, "But also too, it actually threads the needle for people of faith." In other words, a lot of people, particularly of either faiths that give you some kind of like Abrahamic religions, they all have some sort of predictive component to them. And that's a central component to particularly the Western faiths, or not even just the Western faith, the Eastern and Western faiths, or the Abrahamic faiths. They have a predictive component to them. And that actually threads the needle for you, that you can have free will on one hand, and yet these other things are going to happen no matter what. No matter what happens, they will happen. And the NPC was the missing link that people were missing. And the most important part about the NPC narrative is that no one is paying attention unless you're deep inside the Mandela effect community or other fringe communities. So it's not like, suddenly the world is going to wake up to this and go, "Oh my gosh, is half the world an NPC world? And are we walking around and this is all just this digital matrix like the movie?" And no, no, most people aren't paying attention. So we can freely and openly talk about it without any worry of this thing really getting out. So there you go.
I've kind of like people have said, "Oh, dehumanizing and stuff," and I'm like, that's not the reason why I'm upset. Like, I'm not upset on some crazy idea that I think that the people are less capable and just can't handle it. I'm upset because they are capable and don't want to face any of this to such a deep level of denial that I think people don't see that aspect of it. I don't think that everybody that sees that there's something wrong is giving the populace like no responsibility in it. I think that there are people that are like just have never seen this level of denial to the point where it doesn't even seem like possible. It seems like a movie or something. It's just completely absurd levels, and that's what's strange. And I very much teeter back and forth.
That's
because
awesome.
I've said
That's
in
awesome.
the past, like, oh, perhaps they don't have responsibility, but maybe it's just the way they are. But then other times I feel like they do, and they do see what's going on, but they just don't want it on a level that's so deeply ingrained it can't be untangled.
That's a good point. And that's a great way to put it back on them, that it is still their responsibility to have some amount of curiosity, or gosh, for heaven's sake, some amount of just base fear. Use that lizard brain. You got it there for a reason. Use it, for heaven's sakes. I mean, you want to talk about the ultimate outsiders or the ultimate strangers. How about ones that aren't even from your planet or realm or whatever you want to call Earth? They're not even from here. How about that? I mean, wow.
Yep, that's when people don't say wow, that's the weird moment. Not that all this weird stuff is happening, but how people are responding to it.
I go back to, I love my parable of the waiter. I'm always going to use that. And it was so weird by the end of the meal. Not only had he shook the whole thing off, after, because all right, the parable of the waiter, if you're new to the show, because we obviously have a lot of new people here, and thank you for showing up, and please come back, because we have all kinds of really cool and interesting conversations here. And I haven't been paying as much attention to the chat because we're so overwhelmed with concepts right now. But the parable of the waiter, to anybody who's new here, and anybody else who's just wants to hear it again, was when all this UFO stuff was breaking, I was out to dinner with someone, and it was already all over the phone. So it wasn't as if I was giving some kind of insider information if you're in the fringe world, right? I think it was an NBC article, in fact, saying that, well, I mean, that UFOs are real. So I showed the article to my waiter as I was eating dinner. And I said, "Hey, did you hear they announced that UFOs are real?" And just he was thunderstruck with fear. And he says, "Are we all going to be okay?" and I had to, soothe the guy and calm him down, and then by the end of the dinner, the weirdest thing had happened that not only was he almost it was like he got a download or something. He was so cool and calm about it that he got back to his regular mannerisms and the whole way that he presented himself outwardly. Not only did he get back to that, he almost said to me as if we were talking about like a sports game or something. He was like, "Hey, and I'll check out that UFO stuff." And it was like, "UFO stuff? This is like the biggest news like ever." Like ever. Well, short of like some kind of divine intervention, like, you know, what? It was so bizarre, and it started to get more surreal for me than it was for him. It was so odd.
That is, and that it's kind of the typical response is like the other very, very off-putting part about this. As in, like, anybody that will listen for a minute, then they get those weird, like you said, download moment or whatever it is. And suddenly it's like, it's not that they don't remember what you were talking about, it's that they don't care and they've reorganized their memory of what you just talked about to make it far less troubling.
Right, and that's I like that word off-putting. The fact that it had shifted from me between the time of a meal, of a regular meal on a weekend evening. It went from me soothsaying him to him, like, basically, like, giving me, like, the little handgun with you with your hand going, that kinda thing, going, "Alright, I'll check that out, buddy," and he moved on, and it was over with. And it was the weirdest, it was the most off-putting thing, and it was the strangest thing, and he was reprogrammed somehow in that time while I was having my meal, and I was still stuck with this knowledge, and I was still having this knowledge, work through my own mind and how it would play out in the coming weeks, months, and years, and he had already processed through it and was over it and was good to go. It was no big deal. And perhaps that's it. Maybe everyone knows Chick, and they just, they're just going, "All right, buddy, good to see you." With like, that little that gun thing they do with their hands, like, "All right, I got you," and you're like, okay."
That's, yep. I mean, like you just said there, that being able to go through the entire emotions rather, of accepting something in so short a time. He's already gone through it and he's already over it immediately. Oh, Prelim was in the chat
Mhm.
and asking, what is the crystal dome?
Oh, the Crystal Dome is there's going to be the next prediction coming up is there's gonna be a crystal dome somewhere in the ocean, and it will be discovered in the ocean, and it'll probably be reported on much like, they found the moon was made mostly of metal, recently here, but they were and it was alien. The moon is a metal alien satellite thing. And the way that they reported on it recently was they had to admit that it was made of metal. They had to admit that it was some type of almost like machinery or something, because that's what they have to do. They have to admit something to a certain point. I don't really know how that works, but it's there, and then they downplay it. But nonetheless, your moon is not like what you thought your moon was, and it's out in the mainstream. Just like I'm sure there's way more to this alien thing. In fact, I know there's way more to this alien thing than what they're reporting. Now they're going to be reporting on this dome. They're going to find a crystal dome. They're going to report on it, and it's going to be under the ocean, and they're going to and I'm already reading articles about diamonds under the ocean. I should have brought and put one out there. They're already talking about there's so much pressure under the ocean that they can create diamonds. Did you know that, Chick? I didn't know that. That's so interesting. Diamonds at the floor of the ocean. So I would imagine that they're probably going to approach it with something like that. So yeah, that's the next prediction from my contact, is this crystal dome thing. So, um, are your guides giving you this info? In a way, it's a guide. It's a person. It's at least a person in a person form. Jamie, I don't have any kind of I have some abilities, but nothing like some people have, like guides and things like that. I have really good intuition, and I can do some other things, but nothing like getting that kind of specific information. No, this is like intel I'm getting. I'm getting like they know this kind of thing. This is a very human thing I'm getting. So, but I appreciate Jamie you asking the question though. But yeah, it's coming out. So, and so far we were talking about the UFO thing. It came out. We were talking about the moon thing. It came out. So I pretty much just waiting.
Oh goodness. Katrina's creation says in the chat that she's a medium, and that just reminded me, and I think I mentioned this on an earlier episode, but one of the funniest and craziest and most paranormal things that I've seen was Scott Harrison has like a secondary channel where he does like EVPs and like ghost hunting stuff, and I checked it out like quite a long time ago, and it's, oh my gosh, it's so funny. All the He's like asking about the Mandela effect. He's like asking about these different things, and all of the EVP that he's getting is exactly like how people here would answer the same things. They're like not interested. They're saying like blasphemy. Like it's just, it's even for people that don't believe in that kind of stuff. It was so funny to see him get those exact same responses and
Well,
absolutely no insight whatsoever.
well, I'm sorry. Say that again. You're saying that he's talking to people in quote unquote the afterlife, and they're
Yeah,
just not interested in us.
yeah, they don't want to answer any questions about the ME. They don't want to talk about anything outside of the ordinary. They go through like a whole range of emotions really quickly, like your waiter, and then they're over it and bored. Like it's the weirdest thing you've ever seen.
Oh, I love it. So even the or excuse me, UFOs, even the ghosts are freaked out by this. I love it. I love it. I love it. Oh man. Oh, no problem, Jamie. No problem. Oh, that's good stuff. And yeah, that's the funny thing is, for my own suspicions, I think that most of quote ghosts or paranormal activity or anything like that, it's a combination of the gateway. They're clicked out, and they're caught between frequencies. Like I describe it, like the radio concept. I think they're somewhere between the two, and that's it. And and I could just see this stressed out ghost. They want to rattle chains and like creak up skit stairs and lean over your bed is like this dark force or something. I'm probably gonna get haunted now. Like there's probably a local the local ghost 809 whatever chapter of
Oh my gosh. And like you could say like, oh, it's coincidence. It's like words coming in from like different radio stations. Like I'm not trying to push anyone to believe in anything. I'm just saying that uniquely from our perspective, it's
uh-huh.
absolutely just the funniest thing. Like they're so bored. They even start
Right.
saying that like Scott Harrison is talking too much. They're like, oh, he talks an awful lot, doesn't he? Like they're so over him. He's like, does
Uh,
anyone want to talk about the effect? And the ghost
right.
goes, nope,
They don't
don't
want to do it.
care.
They don't want to do it. They're like, whoa, wait a minute, man. This is our realm, man. You're supposed to be afraid of us, and we got all the answers. And he's like, nah, man, this Mandela effect thing is like way crazier.
It is so crazy. He was like asking them about Orion and they couldn't care less. And they're like, oh, it was just so ridiculous. And I was like,
That's
my gosh,
awesome.
is there just no such thing as like any kind of insight, normal, paranormal, governmental, or anything in this situation? There's just no insight. It's just all crazy and all disinterest. And that's all
Now
you
what?
can get.
Now what if the Mandela effect is so powerful they get the download?
That's what I'm saying. Is
Right?
they don't mind at all. They've gotten the download. They don't even have anything to be downloaded into.
And they're all like really angry. They're like, man, I'm in this afterlife and I want my 10 minutes of glory. I want to freak this guy out on a Ouija board and I can't do it. Oh, man.
Oh
I know I
no.
should be careful, Guardian Matrix. Mandela is listening. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Seinfeld, absolutely. You're right. That
Yeah.
thing is like you can get trolled by the Mandela effect. Oh my gosh. Anyone new to this, you've got to be careful. The Mandela effect will troll you like you've never been trolled. The Mandela effect has sort of this really almost childish but very mean-spirited sense of humor to it. And there's almost this yeah, I think childish is a very good way to put it, but it can get to the point of being really reckless like a child would, and you could end up being, in danger from the Mandela effect, so, I should be really I'm not joking the Mandela effect, I'm more, laughing at the I'm more afraid of the or the Mandela effect than I am of the paranormal stuff, so oh god.
Yeah, we got to be
What a great way to
careful
end
with
the show.
our jokes just in case like anything crazy does happen. I always forget that, and we always make crazy jokes. And then thank you for reining us in a little bit there, because there's no telling what line is going to get picked out of something and be made literal like the next day just to troll you.
Right, right. We said something today. It will be they'll literally change around reality to make it real. And my worry is that things like aliens and stuff, there could be other enemies that we don't even know we're messing around. And suddenly we all have to deal with aliens now because they were messing around with the Mandela effect. So it's my big worry. So, all right, look, we're over. We do 1 hour. That's what makes the time so precious. Um, we know there's a lot more than there's 120 watching. If we could get more than 120 thumbs up, that would help greatly. It's the thumbs up that gets us pushed through the machine. I don't know if we're being banned, but I know that our numbers are kind of stagnant. So if you could tell friends to, um, you know, check out the show, check out the channel, and tell them to come on board, and will be greatly appreciated. So, any last words, Chick, before we shut this thing down?
Just saying to everybody, like, don't panic either with the things that are coming out or with the reactions of people about it. Just try and keep a level head, and like how much has already happened, and that you're fine, and that you're dealing with everything just fine, and that whatever comes down the path, we're all going towards it together, and hopefully, rather than being something frightening, we'll be able to figure out more of what's going on the more that we see and the longer this goes on.
Yeah. Yeah, and Bones McCoy, you're right. I've been at 7,000. I was getting, anywhere from 20 to 200 subs a day, and they stopped me dead in my tracks. So the channel, I have no idea what the real numbers are, but so many people have said that they have been unsubbed from me, so they forget about the show or the channel, and then they find out a while back. So the only thing I can tell people is please go to Twitter and get on Twitter, because that's where I put out a lot of information. I'll let you know beforehand um, what's going on with the channel. So that's the only real way to find out when a show's coming up or if you've missed a show. So we're not getting notifications like Buster said. People are being unsubbed from the channel. It's an active campaign, but we're not the only ones. So all right, that's it. We're done for the week. So we'll see you next week, everybody.
See you, everyone.